In a secluded mountain hamlet slung between emerald peaks and mirrored in a placid crater lake, there lived a young girl named Mitsuha Miyamizu, heir to an ancient shrine and all its whispered customs, whose days were draped in ritual and duty, yet whose heart yearned for the roar of neon streets and the pulse of crowded trains. Each dawn she would rise before sunrise to weave sacred cords, assist her grandmother in brewing the fermented kuchikami sake from rice, chewed by maiden lips for the gods, attend her high school classes with two devoted friends, sweet-natured Sayaka and buoyant Tessie, and then retreat to the shrine's hallowed silence, where the weight of generations pressed upon her slender shoulders until she would flee to a cliff overlooking the valley, cry into the rising wind, and plead for oblivion, or better yet, rebirth in another life, more vibrant, more daring, more entirely her own. Far away, in the labyrinthine sprawl of Tokyo, Taki Tachibana strode through subway stations and narrow alleys, a spirited architecture student juggling classrooms, sketches of imagined edifices, and shifts at an Italian restaurant where he admired the soft laughter of his elegant co-worker, the unassuming yet luminous Ms. Okudera, unaware that with each hurried chop of a pizza wheel or polite bow to customers, the boundaries of his reality were fraying. For on certain mornings, he would awaken not in his high-rise apartment, nor dressed in his usual school uniform, but in the kimono of a shrine maiden, stumbling through hushed corridors of tatami mats and incense, only to snap back days later into his own city-slicked body, struggling to recall names of classmates and the layout of his own home, while Mitsuha endured the same perplexity, waking amid Tokyo's ceaseless clamor, fumbling through the thrill and exhaustion of skate park hangouts, history lectures, and the aroma of espresso machines, until, bewildered, they both realized that they were swapping lives, unbidden, at random, through an invisible thread spun somewhere between time and the stars. At first, the chaos was deliciously absurd. Mitsuha, in Taki's body, tore through Tokyo's skyscraper canyons only to embarrass him by flirting with strangers, skipping deadlines, and raining insults in the wrong dialect, while Taki, in Mitsuha's form, inadvertently flouted shrine protocol, engaged in schoolyard scuffles, and left damning messages scrawled on Mitsuha's phone that her friends would discover. But as the switchings persisted, they learned to communicate, leaving cryptic post-it notes on mirrors and spreadsheets of do's and don'ts on smartphones, forging unspoken pacts of respect, and along the way, discovering tender facets of one another they had never known. Taki teaching Mitsuha how to navigate Tokyo's labyrinthine subway map and order coffee in flawless Japanese. Mitsuha, in Taki's body, tore through Tokyo's skyscraper canyons only to embarrass him by flirting with strangers, skipping deadlines, and raining insults in the wrong dialect, while Taki, in Mitsuha's form, inadvertently flouted shrine protocol, engaged in schoolyard scuffles, and left damning messages scrawled on Mitsuha's phone that her friends would discover. But as the switchings persisted, they learned to communicate, leaving cryptic post-it notes on mirrors and spreadsheets of do's and don'ts on smartphones, forging unspoken pacts of respect, and along the way, discovering tender facets of one another they had never known. Taki teaching Mitsuha how to navigate Tokyo's labyrinthine subway map and order coffee in flawless Japanese. Mitsuha, in Taki's body, tore through Tokyo's skyscraper canyons only to embarrass him by flirting with strangers, skipping deadlines, and raining insults in the wrong dialect, while Taki, in Mitsuha's form, inadvertently flouted shrine protocol, engaged in schoolyard scuffles, and left damning messages scrawled on Mitsuha's phone that her friends would discover. But as the switchings persisted, they learned to communicate, leaving cryptic post-it notes on mirrors and spreadsheets of do's and don'ts on smartphones, forging unspoken pacts of respect, and along the way, discovering tender facets of one another they had never known. Taki teaching Mitsuha how to navigate Tokyo's labyrinthine subway map and order coffee in flawless Japanese. Mitsuha entered Taki's body, tore through Tokyo's skyscraper canyons only to embarrass him by flirting with strangers, skipping deadlines, and raining insults in the wrong dialect, while Taki, in Mitsuha's form, inadvertently flouted shrine protocol, engaged in schoolyard scuffles, and left damning messages scrawled on Mitsuha's phone that her friends would discover. But as the switchings persisted, they learned to communicate, leaving cryptic post-it notes on mirrors and spreadsheets of do's and don'ts on smartphones, forging unspoken pacts of respect, and along the way, discovering tender facets of one another they had never known. Taki teaching Mitsuha how to navigate Tokyo's tender facets of one another they had never known. Taki teaching Mitsuha how to navigate Tokyo's labyrinthine subway map and order coffee in flawless Japanese. Mitsuha introducing Taki to the serene beauty of Shinto ceremonies, the art of making kuchikamizaki, and the legends that hummed through her village, including the myth of a comet whose passing once marked a harbinger of calamity. And though they never met face to face, their bond deepened through every borrowed morning and every shared memory, evolving from raw confusion to playful camaraderie to a profound longing that neither could name, until one day the visits ceased, no tremor of magic, no final message, and Taki awoke in his own body to an emptiness that reverberated through his bones, a void left by Mitsuha's sudden silence, and called her incessantly, checked her social media and phone logs, but found only emptiness and an alarming disappearance of all trace. Driven by an ache that felt like love, he took a leap of faith, boarded a Rust Belt train bound for the mountains, sketched the outlines of a town he didn't recognize, but knew by heart, and showed the drawing to locals until an elderly woman shuddered and whispered the name, Itomori. "It doesn't exist anymore," she said. "Not since the comet fragment fell 3 years ago, wiping out the lake and every soul in the village." And Taki's heart cracked, for the last time he had slipped into Mitsuha's life had been on that very day of the celestial catastrophe, which meant that their bodies had been separated by years, his present but her past, and each boundary crossing a miracle threading together timelines. He raced through the ruins of the shuttered school, the charred girders of the collapsed shrine, and discovered in a battered registry that Mitsuha's name lay among the fallen, her final entry on the memorial, December 1st, 3 years prior, age 18. Yet how, he wondered, had they still swapped bodies if she no longer lived? In desperation, Taki climbed the sacred mountain to the ancient shrine atop its peak and drank from the half-emptied cup of kuchikamizake that still bore her spirit. And in that single sip, the world blurred and shifted, and he found himself back in her body on the morning of the comet's arrival, with the fleeting power to change fate. Now he raced through the town, scribbling frantic alerts on arms and mirrors, convincing Mitsuha's school friends, Sayaka and Tessie, that the gas line had ruptured, persuading villagers to gather at the sports ground under the pretense of a festival, arguing with his own shocked father, Itomori's mayor, to issue an evacuation order, and even as twilight bled into skyfire, he sprinted up the mountain path to the shrine to find Mitsuha, his heart pounding, his lungs collapsing under urgency, until at last they stood on the rim of Crater Lake at the edge of evening's glow, their hands brushing in the Katawara Doki, that paradoxical moment between day and night when time loosens its grip, and they glimpsed each other not as phantom shapes in dreams, nor as marionettes in borrowed bodies, but as flesh and blood, tears and laughter, the pure selves they had only ever known through absence. They spoke names aloud for the first time, Mitsuha Miyamizu, Taki Tachibana, etched each into the other's palm as proof against oblivion. But the span of twilight closed behind them, and in a heartbeat the vision shattered. Taki was propelled forward into the aftermath, Mitsuha into devastation. Yet he carried the memory of her voice like a lighthouse beacon. While she, safe now with villagers sheltering on higher ground, stoically watched the comet's firestorm paint the night sky, unknowing that her savior wore the face of rumor and legend. Time resumed its inexorable march, Karakuri style, and both grew into adulthood with the phantom ache of one another's absence. Taki, working in Tokyo's design firms, Mitsuha enrolling in art school and painting comets in her sketchbooks, each haunted by déjà vu on crowded sidewalks and blanketing rainstorms that seemed to echo laughter neither dared call out, until on a rain-swept morning, they boarded separate trains and passed on adjacent staircases, their eyes locking for a second that felt like eternity, pulling at the frayed edges of fate until each found courage to step forward, and in that tremulous moment, they uttered what had always been their final quest. "Have we met before?" "I thought so too." And as the world breathed around them, they smiled, the red thread of destiny glowing invisibly between their hearts, and asked, "What is your name?" And so their story, woven from magic and memory, disaster and devotion, came full circle, proving that some connections transcend time, that love can bridge any chasm, and that the simplest question can awaken the most profound answer. We are bound by threads unseen, by comets and sutras and whispered wishes, and so long as we remember the name of our heart's counterpart, we carry each other forever.